At my brother's funeral, my aunt hugged me and asked, "How did Archie like the treatment center I've been helping with?" I coughed. "What money, Aunt Matilda?" Behind me, my husband Philip's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. The $400 every month for Archie's rehab sweetheart since last January. She pulled out her phone, showing me transaction after transaction. "Aunt Matilda, I never received anything. We couldn't afford treatment." Her face crumpled. "But I sent it to Philip's account. He said it was easier for transfers." She scrolled through screenshots. $400 on the first for 14 months straight. $5,600 total. I knew that account. It was the one I never had access to. My knees buckled. 6 months ago, Philip turned my whole family against me by saying I was letting Archie die by not paying for treatment. Meanwhile, he had $5,600 of Aunt Matilda's money right in his pocket. I remembered sitting in that room, 20 relatives staring at me with disgust. My mother calling me heartless. My father saying he was ashamed. Philip holding my hand, whispering, "Stay strong," while he had thousands hidden away. The voicemail Archie left me that night still haunts me. "I'm sorry I cost too much to keep alive. I love you. Don't blame yourself," I whispered. His counselor called me, said one more week and insurance would have covered everything. Philip stepped forward. "There's been a misunderstanding. Where is my nephew's rehab money?" Aunt Matilda's screams silenced the entire funeral home. "I can explain," Philip started. "Explain what?" I turned on him. "That you stole $400 a month while I skipped lunch every day? While I ate crackers at my desk to save $10? The room spun. Suddenly everything clicked. My wrist. I held up my crooked hand. "I broke it and couldn't afford the ER because we were paying for rehab. It healed wrong. I have permanent damage while you were out buying goodness knows what. It's not what the dealers." My voice rose. "They came to our house with our children home, threatening to hurt us while you had their money in your account." Our family gathered closer, listening in horror. I lost 20 pounds. Everyone complimented me while I was starving myself to save for Archie. "You watched me count quarters for gas." Aunt Matilda stepped forward. "There's more. Check his Instagram." With shaking hands, I found it. His secret account. Wearing designer streetwear. Limited edition Jordans. Craft whiskey collection. Building my empire captions dated while Archie lived under a bridge. "You spent rehab money on sneakers?" I was investing. I miscarried. The scream tore from my throat. "From malnutrition and stress. I bled alone in a hospital bathroom while you were buying Supreme hoodies with money that could have saved my brother." My sister gasped. "The family meeting. You organized it. Made us all confront Emma about enabling while you had thousands hidden." My boss stepped forward. "He told me you were unstable. That's why you lost the promotion." "I lay awake for 14 months, I whispered. "Every single night wondering if my brother was safe, while you slept soundly after checking StockX for shoe prices." I looked at the casket. "He died thinking I abandoned him." Philip backed toward the door. "You're all overreacting." "5,600, Aunt Matilda said coldly. "Wire fraud. My nephew is dead because of you." That's when the realization hit me. He wasn't even an addict when you started stealing. I paused to clear my throat. He'd had surgery, needed pain management. You created this. You killed him for sneakers and whiskey. Philip bolted for the door. "Archie saved you," I called after him. "When you were 16, homeless. He convinced our parents to adopt you, and you killed him for a closet full of shoes you never even wore." Philip tried the door, but Archie's recovery friends blocked his path. Big men who'd gotten clean with my brother, who'd watched him fight for his life. One of them spoke up. "That's why you kept showing up at our NA meetings. You weren't there to support Archie, you were getting dealer contacts." Another added, "Remember when Archie hit 90 days clean? That same night you bought Fent from Gail, his dealer. Then you left it in Archie's car." A third friend steps forward. "You paid Gail extra to text Archie about deals and new product. We have screenshots. You were sabotaging his recovery." The funeral director pushed through the crowd and raised both hands, his face red and sweaty. "Please, everyone needs to remember why we're here today." He pointed at Archie's casket sitting there surrounded by white flowers. The whole room went dead quiet except for my mom crying into a tissue and someone's baby fussing in the back row. My whole body started shaking like I'd been dunked in ice water as everything hit me at once. Philip jerked hard to the left, trying to duck around the big guy blocking the door, but two of Archie's recovery friends grabbed his arms and yanked him back. One of them pulled out his phone and started recording while saying he was calling 911 right now. The other one twisted Philip's arm behind his back when he tried to push forward again. Aunt Matilda stepped closer to me and pulled her phone back out, scrolling through her banking app with shaking fingers. She showed me every single transfer she'd made. $400 on the first of every month for 14 months straight. January 1st, February 1st, March 1st, all the way through. I remembered January 1st perfectly because I'd eaten nothing but ramen noodles for 3 days to save money for gas. February 1st, I'd walked 4 miles to work in the snow because my car was on empty. March 1st, I'd stolen toilet paper from the office bathroom because we couldn't afford to buy any. My brain kept jumping back to that family meeting 6 months ago where everyone turned on me. 20 relatives packed into my parents' living room, all of them staring at me like I was the worst person alive. My mom had stood up and called me heartless in front of everyone. My dad wouldn't even look at me, just kept shaking his head and saying he was ashamed. My sister had actually spit at my feet, and Philip had sat there holding my hand, rubbing my back, telling me to stay strong while he had thousands of dollars sitting in his secret account. The recovery friends started talking over each other, telling everyone how Philip would show up at NA meetings pretending to support Archie. One guy said Philip took notes on who was using again and approached dealers in the parking lot after meetings. Another one showed screenshots on his phone of Philip messaging known dealers, asking about prices and purity levels. The dates on those messages matched up with nights Archie had been trying so hard to stay clean, calling his sponsor at midnight, doing push-ups to fight cravings. The funeral director looked around at all of us and asked if he should call security to help sort this out. Aunt Matilda shook her head and put her arm around my shoulders, pulling me toward the door. She leaned in close and whispered that I needed to get my kids somewhere safe right away, that Philip might do something stupid. My legs felt like jelly as I grabbed my purse from the chair and started walking toward the exit. Every step felt like I was moving through mud, my knees barely holding me up. Aunt Matilda stayed right beside me, her hand on my back, guiding me past all the staring faces of cousins and uncles and family friends. Behind us, I could hear Archie's recovery friends telling Philip to sit down and wait for the cops, that running would only make things worse. Someone's chair scraped across the floor and there was a thud like someone had fallen or been pushed down. I didn't look back. My hands fumbled with my car keys in the parking lot, dropping them twice before I managed to unlock the door. I collapsed into the driver's seat and pulled out my phone, scrolling to Archie's last voicemail from 3 weeks ago. His voice filled the car, weak and broken, apologizing for costing too much money to keep alive, saying he loved me and not to blame myself for what happened. My hands shook so bad I could barely hold the phone. Philip had the money the whole time. He could have saved my brother, but he chose to buy sneakers and whiskey instead. He let Archie die for a closet full of shoes he never even wore. I started the car and drove straight to my kids' school, my vision blurry from tears I kept wiping away. The secretary at the front desk took one look at my face and asked what was wrong, but I just signed the early dismissal form and wrote family emergency in the reason box. She called down to the classrooms, and 5 minutes later my kids came walking down the hall with their backpacks, looking confused and worried. I hugged them tight and told them we were going to Aunt Matilda's house for a sleepover. Trying to keep my voice normal and happy, they knew something was wrong but climbed into the car without asking questions. My phone started buzzing nonstop as I drove, text after text from Philip lighting up the screen. The first few said I was overreacting and blowing things out of proportion, that this was all a big misunderstanding he could explain if I'd just listen. Then they got angrier, saying I'd humiliated him in front of everyone and ruined his reputation for nothing. The last one made my blood run cold, saying I'd regret making a scene like that, and I better come home right now if I knew what was good for me. My phone buzzed again, and Aunt Matilda's name popped up with a text saying she had a spare bedroom, and we could stay as long as we needed. I texted back yes while stopped at a red light, my fingers shaking as I typed. The kids asked where we were going, and I told them it was like a vacation at Aunt Matilda's house, trying to keep my voice steady. We pulled into her driveway 20 minutes later, and she was already standing on the porch with her arms open. She helped carry our bags inside while the kids ran to the guest room, excited about the bunk beds. This is absolutely wild. The way everything just exploded at Archie's funeral with Aunt Matilda showing those bank transfers is making my heart race. I can't believe Philip stole $5,600 meant for rehab, while Emma was literally starving herself and eating crackers to save money. I set them up with cartoons and snacks, then collapsed at her kitchen table. She made me tea and sat across from me, pulling out her phone to show me more bank statements. Every single transfer was there, 14 months of $400 going straight to Philip's account. I started taking pictures of everything on my phone, every screenshot, every text message Philip had sent threatening me. My hands moved fast, capturing proof after proof. I forwarded everything to my email, then logged into 3 different cloud services and uploaded copies to each one. Aunt Matilda watched me work, occasionally pointing out dates that matched up with times I'd been desperate for money. The kids fell asleep on the couch around 9, and I carried them one by one to the guest room. Back at the kitchen table, I kept working, writing down every threat Philip had ever made, every lie he'd told about our finances. My phone battery died, and I plugged it in, continuing on Aunt Matilda's laptop. The next morning, I woke up still at the table with my face on my arms. Aunt Matilda was making pancakes for the kids who were watching cartoons in their pajamas. I grabbed my phone and found Archie's counselor's number, stepping outside to make the call. She answered on the 3rd ring, and when I told her who I was, she went quiet. Then she said she'd been trying to reach me for weeks, that insurance would have covered everything if we just waited 1 more week. She had no idea we weren't paying because Philip told her we were handling it privately, that we didn't need help. My legs gave out and I sat down hard on the porch steps. She kept talking, saying how well Archie had been doing, how close he was to getting covered. I thanked her and hung up, then went back inside to write everything down. I made a list of every single thing I'd suffered while Philip had that money sitting in his account. The broken wrist that healed crooked because I couldn't afford the emergency room. The miscarriage from stress and not eating enough. Losing 20 pounds because I was skipping meals to save money. The dealers showing up at our house. Getting passed over for promotion at work. Each memory made my hand shake harder, but I kept writing, filling page after page. My phone started buzzing nonstop with messages from family members who'd been at the funeral. My mother texted that she couldn't believe what she'd heard, asking if it was really true. My father didn't text at all. My sister sent a long message asking if I needed anything, saying she was sorry for spitting at me. I didn't answer any of them, just screenshot the messages for my records. That afternoon, I knew I had to file a police report. This wasn't just about stolen money anymore. Philip had deliberately caused my brother's death while pretending to support me. I told Aunt Matilda I was going to the station and she offered to watch the kids. The police station smelled like coffee and floor cleaner. The officer at the front desk took my name and told me to wait. 20 minutes later, a detective called me back to a small room with a metal table. Detective Ron Meeks was older with gray hair and tired eyes. He listened while I told him everything, occasionally writing notes on a yellow pad. I showed him all the screenshots, the bank transfers, the threatening texts. He looked through everything carefully, asking questions about dates and amounts. When I told him about Philip paying dealers to contact Archie, his face got serious. He said this could involve multiple charges, including wire fraud and possibly manslaughter. He'd need to investigate more, but this was definitely criminal. While we were talking, someone knocked on the door. Hector McElroy walked in, one of Archie's friends from recovery. He'd come to give his own statement about what he'd seen. Hector sat down and started talking about watching Philip at NA meetings, how he'd take notes on who was using again. He'd seen Philip approach dealers in the parking lot after meetings, exchanging phone numbers. Hector had dates, times, even some photos on his phone of Philip talking to known dealers. Detective Meeks took Hector's phone to make copies of everything. He explained he'd need to subpoena bank records to trace all the money, which could take several weeks. He gave me a case number written on a business card and told me to document any new threats or contact from Philip. He also said I should consider getting a protective order immediately. I thanked him and left, sitting in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. Back at Aunt Matilda's, I called my workplace and asked to schedule schedule a meeting with HR about the promotion I'd lost. My hands shook as I dialed, worried they wouldn't believe me even with all this evidence. The HR manager said she could see me tomorrow afternoon. I hung up and looked at my list, checking off what I'd done so far. There was still so much more to do, but at least I'd started. My phone buzzed with an email from Murray Meredith, my boss at the accounting firm. The subject line just said, "I'm so sorry," and my stomach dropped. I opened it and read his message saying he was horrified to learn what really happened. He admitted Philip had convinced him I was having mental health issues and couldn't handle more responsibility at work. Murray wrote that Philip had called him multiple times, saying I was crying at my desk and making mistakes because of stress at home. None of it was true, but Murray believed him because Philip seemed so concerned about me. The email ended with Murray saying we should talk when I felt ready. I saved it to my evidence folder and made a note to forward it to my lawyer once I found one. The next morning, I searched online for attorneys who handled divorce and financial crimes. I found Jared McQueen's website showing he specialized in exactly what I needed. His office was downtown in a tall building that smelled like leather and coffee. McQueen was younger than I expected, with thick glasses and folders everywhere on his desk. I showed him all my screenshots, bank records, and the police report from Detective Meeks. He looked through everything carefully, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. After an hour of reviewing documents, he leaned back and said we needed to file for divorce immediately. He also wanted to get a protective order and pursue both criminal and civil action for the stolen money. The retainer was expensive, but Aunt Matilda had already offered to help with legal fees. McQueen's assistant made copies of everything while he explained the next steps. Back at Aunt Matilda's house, she was sitting at the kitchen table with her own stack of papers. She'd written out a detailed statement about every payment she made to Philip's account. Her handwriting got shakier as she described thinking she was saving her nephew's life. She wrote about how Philip had called her that first time, crying about Archie needing help, how he'd said the rehab place only took direct transfers and it would be easier through his account. Every month she'd sent exactly $400 on the first, never missing a payment. She thought she was keeping Archie alive while actually funding Philip's shopping addiction. I helped her organize the pages and put them in a folder for McQueen. That evening after the kids were asleep, I opened Philip's Instagram on my laptop. I started matching the dates of his posts to what was happening in our lives. He posted a photo of new Jordans on March 15th, the same week I miscarried our baby. There was a bottle of expensive whiskey dated April 3rd, while Archie was sleeping under the bridge near the library. Designer sunglasses appeared on May 20th, 2 days after dealers came to our house. Every single purchase lined up with our worst moments. I took screenshots of everything, my hands shaking with rage. The next day, Hector McElroy knocked on Aunt Matilda's door carrying a manila envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages between Philip and Gail, Archie's old dealer. The messages showed Philip asking about prices and availability of different drugs. Some texts had Philip promising to bring new customers from the recovery meetings. One message from 3 months ago showed Philip asking Gail to text Archie about a special deal on his favorite stuff. Hector had gotten these from someone who knew Gail and wanted to help. I thanked Hector and immediately called Detective Meeks to tell him about the new evidence. Meeks answered on the second ring and said he'd come pick up the screenshots himself. He warned me not to have any contact with Gail directly since he was part of an ongoing investigation. Apparently, Gail was already being watched for other drug crimes and they didn't want to spook him. Meeks arrived within an hour and took the screenshots from Hector, adding them to the growing evidence file. He said this was looking more serious with each piece of evidence we found. After Meeks left, I drove to the hospital to request my medical records. The records department was in the basement and smelled like old paper and cleaning supplies. I filled out forms requesting everything from the past 2 years. The clerk said it would take a few days to pull everything together. I specifically asked for records of my broken wrist, the miscarriage, and all the times I came in malnourished. These documents would be crucial evidence of what Philip's theft had cost me physically. While waiting for the records, I got an email from Archie's counselor at the rehab center. She'd written a detailed statement confirming that insurance coverage was just 1 week away when Archie relapsed. She included documentation showing how close he was to qualifying for full treatment coverage. The paperwork showed Archie had completed all the requirements and was on track for approval. If he'd just made it 7 more days, insurance would have covered everything going forward. Reading her statement made me cry because it was so preventable. Holy cow, this investigation is picking up speed like crazy. My jaw dropped when I saw Philip bought those fancy Jordans the same week she lost the baby. What kind of person does that? That afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. McQueen's assistant said to check my email for something from Philip's lawyer. I opened it and found a message claiming this was all a misunderstanding about family finances. Philip's lawyer wrote that the money was used for investments to secure our family's future. They were willing to discuss returning some funds if I dropped all the charges and stopped the divorce proceedings. The email made it sound like Philip was being generous by offering to return money he stole. I forwarded it immediately to McQueen, who called me within minutes. He said this was typical behavior from someone who knew they were caught. McQueen started drafting an emergency protective order that afternoon, citing Philip's threats and financial abuse. We filed it at the courthouse before they closed, asking the court to keep Philip away from me and the children. The judge would review it in the morning, but McQueen felt confident it would be approved based on the evidence. I went home exhausted, but knowing I'd taken more steps toward justice for Archie. The next morning, I drove straight to the kids' school while they ate cereal at Aunt Matilda's table. The main office smelled like copy paper, and the secretary looked up from her computer when I walked in. I explained I needed to change all the pickup procedures immediately and remove my husband from the authorized list. She pulled out forms and I filled in new passwords, adding only Aunt Matilda as an emergency contact besides myself. The principal came out when she heard what was happening and promised they'd call the police if Philip showed up trying to get the kids. I gave them a copy of the protective order and watched her scan it into their system. On the drive back, my phone rang and my sister's name appeared on the screen. She started crying as soon as I answered, saying she felt terrible about that family meeting 6 months ago. She kept apologizing about how everyone attacked protect me while Philip sat there knowing he had the money. She said he was so convincing with his lies that nobody thought to question if he was telling the truth. I told her I understood and hung up because I didn't have energy for her guilt right then. Detective Meeks called an hour later saying he'd gotten the bank records through his subpoena. He had every single transfer from Aunt Matilda to Philip's account printed out in front of him. The paper trail showed exactly $400 on the first of every month for 14 months straight. $5,600 total, just like Aunt Matilda said. The records also showed where the money went after it hit Philip's account. There were purchases at Foot Locker, Flight Club, and Stadium Goods, all within days of getting Aunt Matilda's money. Craft whiskey shops had charges for bottles costing $300 each. Designer clothing stores showed purchases for Supreme hoodies and limited edition streetwear. Every single purchase happened within 72 hours of receiving the rehab money. Meek said the pattern was so clear that any jury would see it immediately. That afternoon, Murray sent me an email with attachments I wasn't expecting. He'd gone to HR and gotten copies of every email Philip sent about me over the past year. Reading them made my stomach turn because Philip wrote that I was having mental breakdowns at home. He claimed I was crying at work and couldn't handle basic tasks anymore. One email said I shouldn't be trusted with the Henderson account because I was too unstable. That account would have come with a promotion worth $15,000 more per year. Murray apologized again in his message and said HR was reviewing everything now. The next day, I borrowed Aunt Matilda's truck to get our stuff from the house while Philip was at work. I packed the kids' clothes, toys, and school supplies into boxes and garbage bags. My own clothes fit in 2 suitcases since I'd been wearing the same things for months anyway. I took photo albums, important papers, and the kids' medicine from the bathroom cabinet. I left every single pair of his sneakers exactly where they were in the closet. The police would need to photograph them as evidence, and I wanted them untouched. 3 days later, I had my first appointment with Ruby, who specialized in financial abuse and trauma. Her office had soft chairs and tissues on every table, which I needed immediately. She listened while I explained everything and helped me understand that what Philip did went beyond just stealing money. She called it calculated manipulation, designed to isolate me from support while he spent thousands. She said my anger was completely justified, and I shouldn't feel guilty about pressing charges. That night, I found Archie's last voicemail saved on my phone and forwarded it to Detective Meeks and my lawyer. Listening to my brother apologize for costing too much while Philip had thousands hidden made me sob all over again. Both Meeks and McQueen said it would be powerful evidence for the jury to hear. A week later, Archie's sponsor from NA sent me a written statement through the mail. He described the night Archie hit 90 days clean and was so proud of himself. Everyone at the meeting clapped and Archie cried happy tears about finally beating his addiction. But that same night, the sponsor saw Philip in the parking lot talking to known dealers. He watched Philip exchange phone numbers with guys who sold to people in the program. The sponsor didn't think much of it then, but now it all made sense. He signed the statement and had it notarized at the bank before sending it. Detective Meeks called the next morning with news that made everything even worse. He'd gotten a warrant for Gail's phone as part of the drug investigation. The text messages showed Philip paying Gail to contact Archie about special deals on fentanyl. Philip would send Gail money through Cash App with notes like, "Text A about the good stuff." The dates lined up perfectly with when Philip was buying designer shoes and expensive whiskey. One message from Philip said to make sure Archie knew about the 2-for-1 special that weekend. That was 3 days before Archie relapsed after 90 days clean. Jared McQueen called me 2 days later saying he'd filed emergency paperwork with the court to freeze all our marital assets immediately. He explained that Philip couldn't sell anything, empty any accounts, or transfer money until the divorce was finalized. The judge signed the order that afternoon, and it covered everything including those designer shoes and whiskey bottles Philip bought with Aunt Matilda's money. I hung up feeling relieved, but then opened my laptop to check StockX and Grailed, where Philip sometimes talked about shoe prices. My stomach dropped when I saw his account active with 12 pairs of limited edition Jordans listed for sale. The Travis Scott fragment lows were priced at $4,000 and already had 3 watchers. I screenshot every single listing, including the off-white Chicago ones he posted for $6,000 and the trophy room ones listed at $8,000. The timestamps showed he'd posted them all within the last 48 hours, right after the funeral confrontation. I forwarded everything to Jared, who said this proved Philip knew he was in trouble and was trying to liquidate assets before they could be seized. My phone rang that evening, and my father's name appeared on the screen for the first time in weeks. His voice sounded tired when he said he was sorry for how things went at the family meeting, but then added that I should have communicated better about needing help. I told him communication doesn't work when your husband is actively lying to everyone and turning them against you. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "Maybe we could have coffee sometime to talk more." I said maybe, and hung up feeling empty because his apology felt more like checking a box than actual remorse. Detective Meeks called the next morning to say he'd been interviewing people who attended the funeral and getting written statements. 4 different relatives confirmed hearing Philip admit to receiving the money from Aunt Matilda and seeing the Instagram posts of his purchases. The funeral director also provided security camera footage that captured the whole confrontation, including Philip trying to run. Meeks said the evidence was overwhelming, and any prosecutor would love this case. I drove to my office that afternoon for a meeting with HR about correcting my employment file. The HR manager pulled up all the emails Philip had sent about me over the past year and shook her head while reading them. She typed up a formal note stating that the previous negative reviews were based on false information provided by a third party and would be removed from my record. They couldn't undo the lost promotion or give me back the $15,000 raise I'd missed out on, but at least my file was clean now. Murray stopped by while I was signing the paperwork and apologized again for believing Philip's lies about my mental state. 2 days later, I sat in Ruby Menard's office for my second therapy appointment, trying to untangle all the emotions churning inside me. She helped me understand that my grief over losing my marriage was separate from my rage about what Philip did to Archie. The man I thought I married never actually existed because he was lying and manipulating from the start. She said it was normal to mourn the loss of who I thought he was while also being furious about who he really turned out to be. Ruby gave me exercises to help process both feelings without letting either one consume me completely. Detective Meeks left a voicemail saying he'd met with the assistant district attorney that morning to discuss criminal charges. They were looking at wire fraud for the stolen money, theft by deception, criminal harassment for the threats, and possibly even charges related to Archie's death since Philip deliberately sabotaged his recovery. Philip tried to sell the evidence on StockX, those Travis Scott shoes for $4,000 and Off-White Chicago's for $6,000. He posted them right after getting caught. The ADA wanted to review all the evidence, but Meeks sounded confident they'd move forward with multiple felony charges. The school counselor called that same afternoon saying my kids had been acting out in class and seemed really anxious. My daughter was having crying fits during math, and my son got into a shoving match at recess, which wasn't like him at all. I scheduled appointments for both of them to start seeing a child therapist because Philip's actions had clearly traumatized them too. They'd lived through months of stress and poverty while their father spent thousands on himself, and now their whole world was falling apart. I spent the next morning at 3 different banks trying to open my own account where Philip couldn't access anything. The first 2 banks said I needed my husband's permission since we had joint accounts there, but the third bank let me open an individual account with just my driver's license. I deposited my paycheck and immediately froze my credit through all 3 bureaus to prevent Philip from opening any accounts in my name or taking out loans. The bank teller helped me set up alerts for any suspicious activity and gave me pamphlets about financial abuse and rebuilding credit. Jared McQueen called that afternoon saying he'd filed for emergency temporary custody based on Philip's criminal behavior and threats. He argued that someone under investigation for multiple felonies who'd already violated a protective order wasn't safe around children. The court scheduled a hearing for the following week where I'd need to testify about Philip's actions and why the kids should stay with me. Jared said to bring all my evidence, including the threatening voicemails and text messages. He also suggested I document everything the kids said about their father to show the court how his behavior was affecting them. I spent that night organizing everything into folders while the kids slept at Aunt Matilda's, feeling like I was finally taking control of our lives after months of chaos and lies. The next morning, Aunt Matilda sat at her kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and started writing her victim impact statement while I made breakfast for the kids. Her hand shook as she wrote about sending $400 every month thinking she was saving her nephew's life, when really she was funding the very things that killed him. She wrote 3 pages about the guilt of unknowingly paying for Philip's shopping sprees, while Archie slept under bridges and ate from dumpsters. She had to stop twice to wipe tears off the paper so the ink wouldn't smear. Detective Meeks called around noon saying they got the search warrant approved for Philip's storage unit and were heading there with a team to document everything. 3 hours later, he texted me photos from inside the unit showing stacks and stacks of shoeboxes reaching the ceiling. Most of them still had the plastic wrap on them from the store. There were bottles of whiskey worth hundreds of dollars each that had never been opened. The detective said they were cataloging every single item and matching purchase dates to Aunt Matilda's transfers. That night around 11, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize, but when I played it, I heard Philip's voice saying I'd ruined his whole life and I was going to pay for what I'd done to him. My hands shook as I saved the message and immediately forwarded it to both Detective Meeks and my lawyer, with a note about the time and the number it came from. I couldn't sleep after that, so I sat in Aunt Matilda's living room checking all the locks on the doors and windows. The next morning, my lawyer filed an emergency motion with the court about the threatening voicemail, and by afternoon, the judge had granted an extension of the protective order. Philip now had to stay at least 500 feet away from me, the kids, and Aunt Matilda's house, or he'd be arrested on the spot. Detective Meeks called that evening with more news from the forensic team analyzing Philip's phone records. They found dozens of messages between him and Gail where Philip was asking when Archie would be most vulnerable and alone. The messages showed Philip knew exactly when Archie had therapy appointments, when he'd be walking home from work, when he'd be at his most stressed and likely to relapse. There were texts where Philip actually paid Gail extra money to approach Archie at specific times with offers of free samples. 2 days later, Philip's attorney reached out to my lawyer with a plea deal offer where Philip would sell his sneaker collection to pay back some of the money if we'd drop the criminal charges. My lawyer said they were clearly desperate to avoid jail time and trying to make this go away with partial restitution. I told him absolutely not, because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice for Archie. The protective order hearing was scheduled for that Friday, and I spent the whole week preparing my testimony with my lawyer. When the day came, I sat in that courtroom with my hands shaking under the table, but my voice stayed steady as I told the judge about Philip's threats and the stolen money. I stuck to just the facts without getting emotional, even though inside I wanted to scream. The judge listened to everything and reviewed all the evidence, including the voicemail and bank records. She granted the full protective order for the next year with criminal penalties if Philip violated it. That afternoon, HR called to confirm they'd officially removed the negative performance review from my file, and I was off probation effective immediately. Murray personally called right after to apologize again and said I could reapply for any promotions that came up, and he'd make sure I got fair consideration this time. He said he felt terrible about believing Philip's lies and wanted to make things right however he could. My sister organized a family dinner that weekend at her house without Philip where everyone could try to move forward. It was awkward and painful sitting at that table with relatives who'd called me heartless just months before. My mother kept apologizing between courses, and my father could barely look at me. People stumbled over their words, trying to say they were sorry for believing Philip's lies, but not really knowing how to take back the horrible things they'd said. My cousin admitted she'd thought I was a monster for letting Archie die when all along Philip had the money in his account. The whole dinner felt like trying to put band-aids on wounds that needed surgery, but at least it was a start toward fixing some of the damage Philip had caused our family. Monday morning, Detective Meeks called with the news I'd been waiting for since this whole nightmare started. good. The district attorney had reviewed all the evidence and decided to file formal criminal charges against Philip, including wire fraud, theft by deception, and criminal harassment. He said Philip would either be arrested within the next few days or receive a summons to appear in court depending on whether they considered him a flight risk. The detective said the case was strong with all the bank records, messages with Gail, and witness statements from the funeral. He warned me things would probably get worse before they got better once Philip found out about the charges, but said they were monitoring the situation closely. 3 days later, I sat in Jared McQueen's office signing divorce papers while my hands shook so bad I could barely hold the pen. He filed everything that afternoon and got us on the emergency docket for custody because of the criminal charges. The judge reviewed all the evidence, including the threats and bank records showing the stolen money. She granted me temporary full custody right there in the courtroom while I tried not to cry. We set up supervised visits for Philip at the Courthouse Family Center if he wasn't in jail by then. The next morning, the sheriff's department met me at the house with a moving truck to get Philip's sneaker collection. I watched them carry out box after box of shoes he never even wore while my kids ate crackers for dinner. They cataloged everything and took photos of each pair for evidence. The auction company said the limited editions would bring good money, but nowhere near the $5,000 he stole. We ended up getting $2,300 after fees, which I used for first month's rent and deposit on a small apartment. It was just a 2-bedroom place near Aunt Matilda, but at least the kids could have their own room with bunk beds. I signed the lease that Friday and spent the weekend moving our stuff from Aunt Matilda's spare room. The apartment had old carpet and needed paint, but it was ours, and Philip couldn't find us there. My first therapy appointment with Ruby Menard was that Monday, and I sat in her office crying for 20 minutes before I could even talk. She helped me write down all the ways Philip had controlled me with money and lies over the years. We made a list of boundaries I needed to set with family members who might pressure me to drop the charges. She taught me phrases to use when people said I should forgive him for the kids' sake. I practiced saying them out loud until they felt natural, even though my voice shook. That same week, Murray Meredith called to tell me the promotion I'd lost was posted again. He said HR cleared my record and I should apply if I still wanted it. I filled out the application that night after the kids went to bed. Murray said he couldn't promise anything, but at least I'd get a fair shot this time without Philip's lies ruining everything. The family decided to meet at my sister's house to talk about doing something positive in Archie's memory. We sat around her kitchen table trying to figure out what we could afford. My mother suggested a scholarship at the community college where Archie took welding classes before he got hurt. Justice is rolling forward like a freight train. The DA filing criminal charges against Philip for wire fraud and theft makes my heart sing. Finally, someone's holding him accountable for destroying Archie's life. We pooled our money and came up with $500 to start a fund for students in recovery. The college said they'd match whatever we raised and help us set up the paperwork. It wasn't much, but it was something good coming from all this pain, and maybe it would help someone else get clean. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote Archie a letter I'd never send. I told him the truth was finally out and Philip would pay for what he did. I wrote about how sorry I was that I couldn't save him when the money was right there all along. I folded it up and put it in a box with his photos and the program from his funeral. For the first time in months, I ate a whole plate of spaghetti without feeling sick. I actually slept through the night without taking anything to help me relax. The next morning, Detective Meeks called to confirm Philip's arraignment was set for the following Tuesday. He said the prosecutor was confident about the charges based on all the evidence we'd gathered. Philip kept trying to call from different numbers, leaving messages about how this was all a mistake. I blocked each new number as soon as I saw it and saved the voicemails for evidence. That first week in the apartment, I walked my kids to their new school every morning. The route took us past a little park where we'd stop to feed the ducks for a few minutes. My daughter asked if Daddy would come live with us when he got out of trouble. I told her Daddy had to face consequences for taking money that wasn't his. My son just held my hand tighter and didn't say anything. The school counselor said they were adjusting better than expected considering everything that happened. She set up weekly sessions for them to talk about their feelings in a safe space. I signed all the paperwork and made sure the school knew Philip wasn't allowed to pick them up. Every morning we had the same routine of breakfast and walking to the school, and it helped us feel normal again. The apartment might be small and the carpet might be ugly, but we were safe and together. I could buy groceries without counting quarters, and my kids could have new shoes for school. We were finally free from Philip's lies and theft, even if it meant starting over with almost nothing. What an amazing time sharing this journey with you all. Seriously, thanks for letting me be part of your day. Until we meet again, friends. And hey, if you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.